This month, we're looking at TV shows celebrating the time-honored trope of the Halloween episode. So I'm picking out some of my favorite Halloween episodes by decade. Last time I talked about the 80s with the Garfield special, and this time, it's the 90s. This is where we have a little problem, a very good problem, but the 90s is a massive treasure trove. For me personally, this is the most nostalgic decade for Halloween. This is when Halloween episodes and specials really became a thing. Just about every sitcom I can think of had at least one. Full House, Married with Children, Boy Meets World. Some of these shows merely used the Halloween setting as a backdrop, while others pushed it all the way. The two sitcoms which ruled Halloween of the 90s was Roseanne and Home Improvement. These shows had a Halloween episode consistently just about every year. The plots were usually directly centered around Halloween and involved a great deal of pranks. I especially remember the Home Improvement episode, The Haunting of Taylor House, where Tim decks out his entire basement into the catacombs of terror and ends up scaring some bratty kid. What a great episode. As a kid, this inspired me to make my own haunted house in my basement, although I had to resort to cardboard and paper cutouts. It was nowhere near as extravagant as Tim the Toolman Taylor's. So what about Seinfeld? One of the biggest shows of the 90s, if not the biggest show, did not have a Halloween episode. Seinfeld didn't have a Halloween episode? What's the deal with that? Many of them were family-friendly, such as The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which had an episode called Halloweeny. This one just shines of Halloween. Seeing those neighborhoods decorated, it just epitomizes Halloween of the 90s. There's, of course, Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, which were entire shows revolving around a spooky premise. Those shows were like Halloween all year round. And I'm not forgetting about all those Halloween specials like The Last Halloween with the weird CG aliens, Disney's Halloween Town, and the Halloween Tree, which has beautiful animation. When it comes to traditional animation in the Halloween spirit, this is some of the best around. But those were all TV specials and not part of a series or franchise. And who could forget The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror? When it comes to animated Halloween specials, Simpsons was king. And in terms of consistency, I can't think of any TV series that has had as many Halloween episodes. It's really amazing that there's been a Halloween Simpsons episode for over 30 years and still going. That's impressive. And what about South Park? They capped off the final years of the 90s with such great laughers as Korn's groovy pirate ghost mystery. A Scooby-Doo parody with the band Korn? Sure, why not? South Park always found a way to make it work. So we could have just had an entire marathon about the 90s. Well, damn, what do I pick? It's too overwhelming. So, because that's the name of the game, because that's what I decided here, one per decade, I'm going to have to go with my favorite sitcom of the 90s, Family Matters. It centers around the Winslow family and their annoying neighbor Steve Urkel. Just the thought of Family Matters makes me smile anytime. Immediately what comes to mind is a typical scene of Carl sitting in the living room, maybe reading a newspaper or something, when Urkel comes through the door unannounced to a triumphant laugh and applause track. It's so routine and familiar, and it largely comes down to the character Urkel, even though in the early episodes, the show held its own ground without him. It was a pretty good sitcom, though it didn't stand out in any way, until Urkel gradually took over. Urkel was my hero, the pivotal nerd character I looked up to. He had a heart of gold, he had great respect and love for the Winslow family, but he happened to be a clumsy force of destruction. Urkel was like a tornado, and the practical effects and breakaway scenery and all the damage shown to the Winslow house was really top-notch. As the years went on, after they burned out the same routine, the show took a science fiction turn with Urkel transforming himself into his suave alter ego Stefan, and then Elvis,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
and Bruce Lee. With all these hilarious genre shifts, you never knew what this show was going to throw at you. By season 8, it was so far past the point of no return and just got more and more ridiculous. And that finally brings us to our Halloween episode titled Stevil, which aired on October 25th, 1996. This was the first appearance, yes, the first appearance of the evil Urkel dummy. I mean, how could you go wrong with an evil dummy? You see why I had to pick this episode. It's basically Child's Play meets Family Matters. It's too good to even be true. It opens with Urkel with a jack-o'-lantern warning the audience that this episode is going to be scary. Already, this has got to be the most festive way to start a Halloween episode. You can't ask for any better. But what's funny is that it's kind of true. I wouldn't say it's actually scary, but it's definitely much scarier than a regular Family Matters episode. Up till now, there's never been a killer dummy on the show, which makes it so strange and jarring when it happens. So, Urkel's getting into the Halloween spirit and trying out ventriloquism. He introduces the dummy to the Winslows, and they're already horrified just because it looks like Urkel. Jaleel White is a great voice actor, as anyone would know if they've seen Sonic the Hedgehog or any of the numerous personalities he's had on Family Matters alone. So when he demonstrates his ventriloquism, it actually is pretty funny.
Kansas City!
It should be noted by this point in the series, Jaleel White has grown from a small child to a young adult, but his ability to play the character and his knack for physical comedy has never dwindled. Also, this late in the series, Urkel's living with the Winslows. He sleeps upstairs near the dummy during a thunderstorm, and it just so happens lightning comes through the window and strikes the dummy. You know what that means. So now, the dummy is alive. Urkel wakes up to find it missing, but soon enough, it shows up on the other bed. Urkel, of course, freaks out. He brings it downstairs, raving to the rest of the Winslow household that the dummy is alive. But as these things always go, nobody believes him. He tries to prove it, but of course the dummy stays still when everybody else is looking. So then Urkel begins to doubt his sanity. But once they're alone, that dummy starts talking again. So in one of the funniest moments, he tries to convince himself that he's not seeing this. He states his own name, his IQ, his love for cheese and polka music, and then he turns to see the dummy still standing there, making this hilarious face, moving his eyebrows. And then Urkel just casually looks away as if it's not happening. That is gold. Then the dummy yells boo and scares Urkel up to the room. He scotch tapes the door shut, which is a bit absurd even for Urkel, and the dummy climbs in through the window. I have to comment on the dummy effects, which have that low-budget charm. In the close-ups, it's a puppet, but in the wide shots, they clearly have a child or a small person playing him. It works quite well. Also, there's some full-body shots where he's a standing marionette. Every now and then, you can see some strings, which only adds to the appeal of the practical handmade craft. The dummy inevitably scares Urkel once again and has a conversation with him. Urkel says it's impossible, dummies can't talk, and then the dummy says, I suppose I can't dance too, and then the dummy dances, which is another one of those strange little moments where you never know what this show is going to do. Then the dummy gets down to business and says he hates the Winslows and wants to get rid of them all. Urkel, of course, strongly objects, calling the dummy evil, which gives the dummy the idea to name himself Stevil, which he says in a dramatic close-up complete with lightning flashes and sinister chuckle.
Stevil!
So just as the kids leave to trick-or-treat, Urkel runs downstairs to inform Carl, who still doesn't believe him. But Urkel tells him anyway to rest assured that he's locked the dummy in a trunk. We all know that's not going to last. There's a good shot of Stevil's eyes glowing inside the dark trunk. Next time we see Stevil, he's coming down the fireplace stalking Eddie. Eddie hears the noise, goes to investigate by crawling all the way into the fireplace, and then he gets pulled up the chimney by Stevil. The effect is simple, comedic, and does the trick. And so, Stevil's body count has begun. Next, he's chasing the trick-or-treating kids who pedal on their bikes against a blue screen while Stevil follows in Urkel's car. The effect is delightfully cheesy. Next, Stevil's talking to Urkel again and shows him where he put the bodies. In the wall, apparently. Their faces are transplanted onto the bodies of cardboard cutout basketball players. So I guess he sort of takes their souls or their likenesses and puts them, I don't know, it's not meant to be figured out. Then Urkel finds that Stevil also got rid of Laura by spreading her body into cabinets like a magician. It's another weird effect that doesn't make much sense. It's also worth noting that you hardly see Laura in this episode. This is her only major scene. Traditionally in Family Matters, she's Urkel's love interest, who wants nothing to do with him, but that dynamic had already been worn out so much by now, so in this episode she's nothing more than just another victim for Stevil. Next we see Harriet, who also doesn't get seen much here, and she's been turned into a jack-in-the-box, which has got to be the weirdest effect so far. So Urkel throws Stevil in the fridge, but he busts out the other side through the wall, and then Urkel comes into the living room to find Carl acting a little strange, saying weird things as if someone's controlling him. Well, we have some idea where this is going. So Carl flops over, and behind him is Stevil, who's been doing his own sort of ventriloquist act using Carl. And for Urkel, that's the last straw. So Urkel becomes tough guy all of a sudden and fights Stevil.
Come on, you and me, one-on-one, mano a puppet.
This gives him a chance to do that funny fight dance, and the fight that ensues is full of slapstick and silliness. It's funny just seeing Urkel body slamming a dummy. It ends with Urkel pulling off Stevil's head and then tearing all his limbs off. So, he's defeated the evil dummy, and it's all over. But oh wait, the limbs start moving and come back together. Gotta love the classic reverse photography. So now that Stevil is back together, he's really pissed off. He starts strangling Urkel, then it dissolves to Urkel in the bed as Eddie wakes him from, you guessed it, a bad dream. Don't you wish it wasn't a dream, that the dummy really came to life? It wouldn't be any less bizarre than Urkel turning into Elvis and Bruce Lee. And in case you wanted to know where this series ends up, in the very final episode, Urkel goes to space. Yeah. Anyway, Urkel confirms the dummy's not alive and then wonders why he had a dream like that. So Eddie actually attempts to explain the psychology behind it, which is so funny because it's out of character. Then he tries to remove Urkel's disorder by means of surgery using an electric egg beater on him. And there we have the classic dream within a dream. So once everything's back to normal, the episode ends, but as an added bonus during the credits, there's behind the scenes footage which shows everything from the dummy being puppeteered to the actors performing on the blue screen. It's really great because you usually never get to see how these old shows were made, so it's a great treat for the audience. Anyway, this is one of the best or worst episodes of Family Matters depending which way you look at it. I would not recommend it as an example of the show, but for a Halloween episode, it's mandatory. This episode must have been such a hit that the following year there was Stevil 2. This time he's not alone. Yeah, that's the title, because this time he has an evil Carl dummy as well. And get this, his name is Carlsbad. Yeah, it's good stuff. Maybe we'll get to that another time. In fact, I should just stop everything, stop all other videos, and just review every episode of Family Matters from now on. I'm only half joking.